and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be me reviewing / ranting Youngblood by Sasha Laurens. I've already done my NetGalley / Goodreads review for it, which just kind of covers the basics of the issue / issues. I just barely covered some of the issues that I had with this book. I did a 24-hour reading vlog on it because I was catching up to some of my arcs that I had, and I had high hopes for it, and I was severely disappointed. And disappointed it doesn't even cover the immense amount of disgust I felt while reading this as well. So let's just kind of get into it. This will have spoilers and it will have trigger warning, but this follows two vampires, Kat and Taylor. Kat is from Sacramento and has lived with the humans her entire life and has felt like she's been missing out on like the vampiric experience of enjoying herself. So she goes against her mother's wishes and applies for the highest prestigious boarding school that's only vampires only, and gets in under the circumstances of a mysterious donor. Taylor has been part of the vampire world for as long as she can remember. She is actually kind of like old blood. She's very rich, very classic vampire kind of vibe. She's also the only out lesbian in the academy and has been dealing with the blowbacks of that. Now the two of them are roomed together and they both kind of realize that they know each other. They were once friends and then all of a sudden things kind of ended and then they are no longer friends. Now the two of them end up also uncovering a kind of devious, almost sinister act surrounding this disease that is rampant in vampires. Has completely wiped out some of the older generation, only leaving the younger to kind of live and thrive in these situations. Trigger warnings for this book: there is homophobia, there is racism, as usual because it's a vampire wanting to rule the world, anti-Semitic vibes in there, there is misogyny, death, blood, gore. Let's see, what else was wrong, had these trigger warnings in this book? Alcohol, for sure. And I think, oh, death of a parent, that's one. I think that's about it. Now, moving on to my first thoughts, because this is probably one of the few positive things that I have about this book, is that I was super excited for it. It's like vampires, it's queer, it's in a boarding school, and it's just all vampires. It gave me high-key Vampire Academy vibes, which I've been trying to read for a while now. So I was just like, let's do it, because Vampire Academy is not queer from last I checked. So this sounded like the perfect thing. And on top of that, it's also friends to enemies to lovers. So it was just a nice mesh of like concepts that I really enjoyed meshed into one book. That is about the only good thing that moving on to the things I did like. The world building I thought was nice. It had a developed world, developed politics, developed processes and values within the vampiric world. And I like the concept of the disease. I thought the disease was interesting. You rarely ever see vampires get affected by human diseases, but this one affected them so badly that most of the older vampire generation has died out and has left kind of the newer generation to survive and figure things out without like people like who created their family, their parents, etc., etc. That was about as far as it got with how much I like this book. That's the max. That's as far as we got. There are so many bad things. Let's just start off with some of the lighter things. And we'll move into the things that'll get me heated, that'll get me angry, and it probably will have me pacing. Some of the lighter things was that I felt like the romance in the book was basically non-existent. The two girls rarely interacted. They literally just said hi and bye for most of the book, up until a kind of traumatic incident where Taylor goes to a party where they feed on humans who don't have this disease and use them as like puppets and dolls, and she ends up getting hurt, and then she comes home in tears and Taylor's like, oh no, let me help you feel better, and they watch the entirety of the Twilight movies in one weekend, and then like 2 weeks later they're like, I'm in love with you. I also felt like the huge like reveal to the entire world that this huge founding company that was trying to find a cure for this disease was actually not finding a cure for this disease, because then they would run out of money, because they also happened to develop the fake blood that everyone's been living off of for the past like how many decades. They revealed that information through a school play where everyone watched and everyone just kind of believed them and was like, oh no, he's the bad guy. And I'm sitting here like, the fuck do you mean? So one of the things I especially did not like was the fact that this book just screamed way too white savior for me. Kat, having lived with humans and was from, you know, very diverse Sacramento, California. She had gay friends, so she was like really into that, like into the community. When she got there, her first question was like, oh yeah, do you guys have any social justice clubs like BLM or like environmental stuff? And like it was just very much like basing her entire personality of like being a good vampire around being a white savior. She was the one who made comments on how bad it was to feed off of humans. She was the one who stood up for Taylor when there were like lesbophobic, homophobic comments being thrown around because Taylor is the only gay out at the school, because, you know, vampires in their hundreds of years of being alive can't form a single progressive thought. So they're all just conservative and think that girls should dress like girls and guys should dress like guys, and you should be dating the opposite sex. And when she asked, like, hey, why are there only like 7 black kids at this like super vampiric school? Surely there are more like black vampire children. She was basically responded with, well, why would black kids want to come here when we have the twins in the corner here from Texas ranting and talking about how much they lost during the Civil War? There were so many discussions, potential discussions, about how like academia is so white and so classist, but all it really came down to, like the fact that like they made comments on how like she's only gonna get chosen because she's poor, so she'll look good against a really rich kid whose parents own this foundation. So it was just one of those things where it was like those like discussions of like how private academia specifically, which is very white and privileged, all went down the gutter. There was nothing expanded on, there were no other discussions and no like discussions on like what it could do to change that. It was just there to make Kat look like the better person because she was poor and she was woke and she was outspoken about all of these things. And it was icky from start to finish. There was even a scene, so like her beard, in a sense, the first like kind of like red herring love interest is a sweet kind of dumb dude who doesn't realize that what they're doing is bad because, you know, he's rich and he's privileged, and no one in the world decided to tell him, hey, don't feed on humans. So he expects like a cute little pat on the head when he does something good and basic and decent. But he basically says something along the lines of, yeah, my parents met, because he's half Indian, my parents met when my dad was traveling with the British trading company to India, that British trading company. And she was like, you mean the ones that colonized India? And he goes, no, it's not like that. It took decades of him wooing her before she even gave him a chance. And it's just one of those little things that's so plainly obvious that makes Kat look like she's the best thing out there. She's better than sliced bread and like bread and cheese together, because she's able to like figure out these things and like put them to light. And it was icky and gross. I didn't like it. On top of that, the obvious like slight racism, the only full Asian, the beautiful Asian vampire that we got there is the stereotypical mean girl who's there just to be mean, and is the one who throws parties that gets people off campus to her like private apartment because she's like an influencer. So she has all this power to do like giveaways, and she does giveaways where she gets people to come to like glamour them or whatever they do to them on there to make it seem like they're having the time of their lives at this party while they're being drunkenly eaten off of, basically. And it's okay because, you know, she has so many followers and she's a vampire and she's great. This is what vampires do. They overtake people lesser than them. Oh, I'm sweating with how heated I'm getting about this. It's Revia's sister. You have vampires. You have a disease, which I will discuss, that changed everything for what we consider to be normal for vampires, what we consider to be normal for humans. And yet you still manage to include concepts like vampires are supposed to be the stronger race, the better race. They should be on top. We should find a cure for this disease so that way we can dominate humans again and eat freely however we choose instead of having to hide in the shadows because we got completely decimated. And it doesn't sit right with me when authors go out of their way to revise history and add all of these beautiful little things that like flush out this world and make it so tangible, only to sprinkle in racism and homophobia. Only to do that. And it just feels like there were so many other ways you could do to make Kat seem like a good person. There were so many other ways you could have introduced her humbling personality and her very I'm a great white person. I'm a good straight white person with zero privileges because I grew up poor in Sacramento, California. It just doesn't make sense to include all of these stupid little racist and homophobic and anti-Semitic remarks in here and like tropes and all this shit because it's unnecessary. There were other ways you could have done it without having to include all of these things and without having to include these discussions that, you know, a white girl is speaking about this. A white girl is the one who is making waves and discussions that as if other BIPOC vampires haven't talked about before. Like it's somehow revolutionary to everyone at that school. Which it's not. The only reason why you're not being ostracized is because you're white, Kat. On top of that, there was like, she has two friends in the Alphabet Soup Mafia. I don't remember their names because they were that unimportant. You literally see them at the beginning of the book and then she sprinkles them in flashbacks throughout the book to show that she has not lost her way. She is still a good, human-loving person because she has two queer best friends. So one of them is gay and the other one is non-binary. Now, around the time that Kat starts questioning her sexual identity, because like literally in the beginning of the book, they talk about how she's like the best cis het straight ally the gays could ever ask for. So she's like she's just sitting here going, well, you know, my friends have always thought of me as straight and they must be experts on the gay experience for millions of people on this earth, billions of people on this earth, so therefore I should believe them when they say I'm straight. And to boot, there's a flashback where she asked the gay one, like I said, doesn't even, they're so inconsequential to the book that I don't even remember their names. But she asks him, hey, so how did you find out you were gay? Which, like, yes, we are kind of all annoyed at that question, but like, sometimes people are like genuinely curious. I don't think it's not a bad question to ask, but it's not a question that should be asked frequently. So in response, her like best friend ever, who like absolutely adores her and would never shut her down, kind of groans and like makes a complaint and goes, you know what, I hate that question because you never just find out. You just know that you're gay, just like you know that you're straight. And shut down that exploration because she's like, well, I don't know that I'm gay. I've never had to, you know, I have to be straight, right? Because I never like woke up and was like, oh my god, I'm gay. As if we aren't consistently fed with heteronormative societies that fool us into the fact that we should think a certain way, lean a certain way, act and drink a certain way, and that in order for us to start questioning and knowing if we are not what society wants us to be is by having chances to question and deconstruct our thoughts and processes. But sure, you know, she didn't wake up when she was popped out of the womb with a little pride flag. So therefore, she has to be the default. She has to be straight, right? Right? As if that's a beautiful conversation that every friend should ever have. It's also kind of triggering for me because when I was trying to come out and figure things out, a lot of people were always like, no, you're too boy crazy to be gay. You're too boy crazy to be bi. So I was just like... Now lastly, I think it's lastly, the disease. So this disease is centered around mainly humans, and these humans who have this disease are just like kind of slow to create blood clots. The blood clots struggle, and there's like some weird distinction where a vampire like takes a bite out of them, and because the blood is so weird, they literally fizzle up and turn into ashes. You know, like they literally just kind of like die. They turn into like mummified little things before turning into ashes and fizzling out, like their organs get burned out, everything, you know? Now, about halfway through the book, after the only gay teacher dies, is murdered of this. I started realizing that it was very akin, this disease, to HIV and AIDS. It had a likeness to it in the sense that it literally destroys all of the immune system that happens in the vampire's body. You know, literally destroys them physically. And it happened around 50 to 60 years ago, and it happened so quickly and so fast that it nearly decimated an older generation of vampires, and left the younger generation, or what was remained of the older generation, to pick up the pieces and figure out a cure. On top of that, it's this foundation that's supposed to find a cure for it hasn't found a cure, because then they would lose all of the money they made from finding this temporary solution to HIV and AIDS. Again, could have been an interesting discussion. Could have done something and like been a metaphor for how we treated people with HIV and AIDS. How this, and this really decimated the LGBT population back in the 50s and like back in the 50s and 60s, treated us like anomalies. And now that's why a lot of the times when we hear the older generation go, oh, it's just a new thing. It's not. It's because we were fucking murdered. We were not murdered, but we were destroyed by a disease that no one wanted to take seriously, and only left to, and was turned into something horrible where people couldn't even say goodbye to their families. Thank you, Reagan. There was no discussion of that, and it felt so unnerving to have the only gay teacher be the one to literally find a cure, to find something to fix this problem for all of them, and to reunify. That was his goal, is reunification. He wanted vampires and humans to coexist, to live peacefully, to find a cure, but still live off of Hema, which is the fake blood that they use, so that way they could just live peacefully and not have to hide in the shadows or think that they're better than humans. And he was brutally murdered by putting him through that disease. It completely destroyed his body. And it's just these little things like this where, like I said, if you are going to write something that is similar to this, which, like, genuinely, I don't know the author's thought process, but it's not hard to figure out those dots. And on top of that, again, it's revised history. Like, you if you're going to write in dark academia or revise history in some way, but still include these very harmful things, there has to be discussion about it. You can't just leave it for the dust, especially when it's such a big plot point. This Hema, like, CFAD thing was such a big plot point in this book, and it was so damning, and everyone was so scared of it, and just wanted it gone and fixed so that way they could live healthy, normal lives without it. And there was no discussion beyond it. There was no discussion beyond the obvious racism in academia, or the obvious concept of, like, what it means to really find yourself. It was just a disappointing book all around. And I feel like the people giving it 5 or 4 stars on Goodreads, they just didn't read too deeply into it, which is fine. But within that same vein, if you, the e-reader, the ARC reader, does not catch these things as a privileged white person who can simply just ask for an ARC and enjoy a book at face value, and not dig deeper and understand more, and then put your review out and recommend this, that is severely damaging to the BIPOC people who want to read this book, who are excited to read this book, and only to find it littered with so much racism and so much anti-Semitism from old vampiric tropes and discussions. And it's quite hurtful that that the 1 stars are there, but they never explained why, but the 5 stars dominate it, and it's all, I recommend it, it was so cute, it was so great. But then, again, when people read this, it's going to be like one thing after another, just reminding them of all this shit, and I don't recommend this book. Like, I think there are probably other, there are probably other and better vampire boarding school books that are queer and discuss these things in better ways, or just completely take it out and revise history in a way that doesn't include modern day problems and doesn't use it in a way to further how great the white character is, how great she is, and why, and be the sole reason why we need to reunify and desegregate, which is also that. between vampires and humans. It just, you know, there are other books, and if there aren't books out, then you know what, maybe someone needs to be the writer, because this shit was not it. Like, I would have stopped reading had I not thought this was a train, and I'm kind of glad I kept reading, or else I wouldn't have been able to give out this more fleshed out review. But that is it for my review rant of Youngblood by Sasha Laurens. If you guys enjoyed this and want me to do more rants, let me know in the comments below. I've been trying really hard not to get into rants recently. Not because I don't think they're fun or like people enjoy them, but more so that means that my shelves and my Kindle is filled with books that I just did not like. And you know, when you're depressed, you kind of want things to be a little happier, a little lighter. But if you guys want me to do more, I can certainly find a book or two every now and again and read it just so you don't have to. But until next time, hopefully you guys are staying safe, and hopefully you guys are having a great week, and bye!